In this section, we will see how security controls are implemented in applications. Application controls are controls over the input processing and output. As you know, any application takes input from the users, process this input due to certain logic, and then provides an output, whether on the screen, whether to a printer, whether to a file, etc. So application controls are controls over input, processing, and output functions of an application to ensure that only valid, complete, and accurate data is entered to the system or the application, to ensure that processing is performed as intended, and to ensure that data and information is adequately safeguarded and maintained once it's output. So we have three types of control. Input controls, which are techniques and procedures used to validate, verify, edit data to ensure that only authorized and correct data is being entered into an application. We have also processing controls, which are procedures to provide reasonable assurance that input is processed as authorized in a complete and accurate manner. The output controls are controls to ensure that output from the information system or application is accurate, complete, and distributed to authorized individuals. Let's begin with some of the input controls and explain what do they mean. CheckDigit is a character added to the input value by applying an algorithm to ensure that original data have not been altered. CheckDigits are useful in detecting transcription or transposition error. It's like a function to make sure that data is not transposed or it's not mistyped. This way, the application will ensure that the data attended is being input. Record count is a control total of the number of the records entered that is matched with the number of records on the batch order. So we just compare numbers on the batch file versus the numbers that are being input to the application. Table lookups is the process of data input whereby the value of the input is selected from a pre-input table. So you have a drop-down list to minimize the errors of typing. Field check is used to check the type of the field. So if you have a field check with a date value, you only can enter date values and not textual values. If you have, for example, a field check with numerical value, you cannot enter textual value. Limit and ranges, as the name convey, you specify some ranges. So if you have an input text box with a numerical value and you're expecting age in this input text, so you can specify the range maximum 80 or 90, whatever. So you don't expect to have values that are higher than 100. So this is how you limit the range of input. Reasonable test is, again, some logic to match the input. So if you're expecting number of hours worked per week, you kind of expect to have like 8 hours per day times 5 or 6. This is the maximum, or sometimes 10 hours per day. You don't expect to find like 300 or 400. So these are some of the tests that are performed at the application level. We also have many batch controls such as hash totals, document records, etc. These are controls used when you're inputting a huge amount of data into the application. Sequence check ensures that a control number follows a predetermined sequence, such as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So whenever there is a transaction that is out of sequence, you directly reject it. So it like works in a chronological order to give numbers to transactions. Validity checks ensure that validity in accordance with pre-programmed criteria. This is mainly a hardware control that is embedded within the hardware. and where the computer would compare input characters to the characters it received. It's quite a complex input control. Continuing with input controls, we have completeness tests or checks to ensure that no fields are missing from a record. So it searches for missing information. We have duplicate checks to test whether the same value is input twice. So when you sign up twice to a website, it automatically detects that this email has already been put. So this is a duplicate check. Key verification, whereby the data is input twice and both inputs are compared for similarity, such as when you're creating your password, the application asks you to put your password twice in order to confirm its accuracy. Echo check is a check where the computer returns received data to verify correct reception of the data. Logical relationship check compares the relationship between data input and one field and one or more other fields according to a pre-programmed logic. For example, if you have a CV and you have listed the experiences in where you have previously worked. So the system usually takes your PDF file or Word file in a CV and populates your experiences in a specific form. So it expects that your first experience is, for example, after the age of 18. So this is a kind of logical relationship check. The first experience is after the age of 18 and not less than that. So it's based on a predetermined logic. Input authorization verifies that all entered transactions have been authorized and approved by the management. These can be manual and these can be automated. Let's go down to the processing controls. These are more like a hardware kind of controls. We have editing, which are checks to test that input and updates in an application are accurate and valid. We have the manual recalculations, which are recalculations made on a sample basis of the processed transaction to ensure that transactions are being processed as originally intended. Run-to-run totals are controls to ensure that data input into the computer was accepted, processed, and applied. So it's like when you're in a mall at the cashier, you see that the total is being summed up upon the scan of each item. So this is a kind of run-to-run total control. Limit and range tests may also be used as input controls as well, are checks to ensure that a processed value is within a predetermined value or range. So it's the same thing as we've spoken earlier about the input controls. Reasonableness test is the same as well as input control. Exception reports are reports produced flagging transactions that appear out of sequence or out of ordinary. This is actually flagged out to be checked later. Programmed controls are controls in the processing software used to detect errors in data and processing and under the user on initiating and direct the user on initiating corrective actions. Internal and external labeling are controls to ensure that the correct files are processed. So you usually label files or label data tapes or backup tapes to make sure that you're using the correct tape. File updating and maintenance authorization are controls to ensure that stored program data used for processing are adequately safeguarded. And data file security are controls that prevent unauthorized access to the application to alter data. Last but not least are the application output controls. We have the error listing, which are lists of processing errors that have been encountered after the processing has taken place. We have spooler controls, which ensure that there are sufficient access controls to spool files since their content may be easily converted to usable output, and this is usually at the printer's level, so that you make sure that the output sent to the printer is only accessed by authorized people. Output distribution controls should exist to ensure that distribution is made in accordance with pre-authorized automated or manual parameters. There should be formal procedures specifying who are the authorized recipients of a certain output. Output retention controls should ensure that output retention is being adhered to in accordance with the organizational policies, maybe legal or industrial regulations as well. And console log are logs of all significant activity, particularly interruptions, interventions. This log should be reviewed by the certain control group for any unusual activity. So as you can see here, we have different types of controls at all the stages of data processing, starting from input, processing of the data, and then to the output.